Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and in this one, we're having a Mac attack. Yeah! All right, have fun, guys. All right, so in the last episode, we started a deep dive into Nature Magazine, right? The most prestigious scientific journal on all the realm, right? Because they are the driving force of this and so many other stories that affect not only the scientific community, but our daily lives as well. And right out of the gate, we learned that being a manufacturer and distributor of Nazi propaganda somehow doesn't make one a war criminal. And in fact, it's such good business that these three companies get a pass and go on to own a 40% share of the English-speaking publishing world. And this just blows my mind thinking about it, right? And so now it's time to get to the star of this episode, Nature Magazine. And so this is the cover that someone chose to represent the magazine on its wiki page, right? And it features an artistic representation of Proxima Centauri and its planet Proxima b. And so am I the only one having a hard time trying to find the science on this cover? You know, for a scientific journal with the clout and prestige Nature Magazine has, if they have any integrity at all, they should retract this cover because this artistic representation isn't science. And so I can hear the managing editor soliciting this cover from the artist now. Hey man, we're looking to run a cover story on Proxima Centauri, and we would love a spiffy image of its planet Proxima b. A reference photo? Oh no, we don't have one of those. Just use your imagination and give us something cool looking. It's not like anybody's ever going to see this planet with their naked eyes. And thus, subliminal reinforcement of a vast universe hits the marketplace. It's the oldest trick in the book. Yet somehow we're supposed to trust a scientific journal that uses subtle deception on their covers without questioning how deep the deception in their pages could run. Right? Especially with the history that Nature Magazine has, right? And so Nature Magazine comes to the Springer Nature empire via Holtzbrinck and their ownership of Macmillan. And so Nature Magazine was launched in the fall of 1869 by one Norman Lockyer and Alexander Macmillan, who is the co-founder of Macmillan Publishing. And it was launched as a public forum for scientific innovations amid stiff competition because, at the time, London underwent enormous technological and industrial changes and advances, particularly in the latter half of the 19th century, of course, right? And so the most respected scientific journals of this time were the refereed journals of the Royal Society, which published many of the great works from Isaac Newton to Michael Faraday to Charles Darwin. And I love this language, refereed journals. And so this is a very curious word to me, right? And so in addition, right, the number of popular science periodicals doubled from the 1850s to the 1860s. Scientific publishing was exploding in this era, right? And one of these other magazines that was launched was this one called The Reader, right? And it was founded by Norman Lockyer, who goes on to co-found Nature Magazine. And the publication mixed science with literature and art in an attempt to reach an audience outside of the scientific community. But The Reader crashes and burns in just a few years. But undaunted, Norman Lockyer convinces Alexander Macmillan to put up the funds, and he relaunches, and they essentially just rebrand The Reader as Nature Magazine. Right? And so Nature Magazine was similar to its predecessors in its attempt to provide cultivated readers with an accessible forum for reading about the advances in scientific knowledge. Right? And this one, Janet Brown, has proposed that far more than any other science journal of the period, Nature was conceived, born, and raised to serve polemic purpose. And now this is amazing because polemic is a contentious rhetoric intended to support a specific position by forthright claims and to undermine the opposing position. The practice of such argumentation is called polemics, which are seen in arguments on controversial topics. A person who writes polemics or speaks polemically is called a polemicist. And so now this is really amazing because if Nature Magazine was conceived, born, and raised to serve polemic purpose, right, and essentially polemics is being stubborn and trying to discredit your opposition, well then it's amazing that Nature Magazine, many of the early editions of Nature consisted of articles written by members of a group that called itself the X Club. Not the X Club, right? That exclusive dining club of 9 men that wielded significant influence over scientific thought, and who was known for having liberal, progressive, and somewhat controversial scientific beliefs relative to the time period. And I love this because it implies that those ideas aren't controversial anymore. And so I think we found the stars of the next naturally selected episode, because the final evolution of this episode is Macmillan Publishing, who show their true colors before you even get there when they call themselves independent. And right on their webpage, they call themselves independent. Independent, forward-thinking, author-focused, global. Independent from who? From Springer Nature? From Holtzbrink and BC Partners, who own 53 and 47% of Springer Nature, which owns Nature Magazine and Macmillan now? We've shown that all of these companies are privately held for-profit businesses. Using the word independent to describe yourself is about as disingenuous as it gets, especially when your company and its $1.4 billion in revenue have been a wholly owned subsidiary of Holtzbrink since 1999. Calling yourself independent is a joke, right? And Macmillan's reach into academia cannot be understated, not only through its publishing of Nature Magazine, but through its other tentacles, Macmillan Learning and Macmillan Education, who together make one of, if not the, largest suppliers of textbooks and educational curriculums on the realm. Educational curriculums like this program, Macmillan Science, right? It's a carefully graded primary science course for 6 to 12-year-olds, and it's designed to meet the needs of international learners. A realm-wide program that gets all 6 to 12-year-olds on the same page. One curriculum to rule them all, because we know that once this information is absorbed by the young, it's very hard to counter that programming. And so this educational and publishing empire gets its start in Scotland with a pair of brothers, Daniel and Alexander Macmillan, who in 1843 opened their own bookshop in, of all places, Cambridge, which of course has one of the oldest and most prestigious colleges on all the realm, right? Cambridge University, which was founded in 1209 and consistently ranks among the best universities in the world. Right, and here's King's College Chapel, an amazing chapel building, right? And I love their coat of arms as well, with these seahorses. But you would think that by 1842, there would have been well-established booksellers in Cambridge, being one of, if not the biggest university town in the empire at the time, right? But despite these odds in the competition, the Macmillan brothers are very successful with their bookshop, and they soon start publishing their own books as well, right? But after Daniel's death in 1857, Alexander picks up the reins of the company, and he expands it into a worldwide organization and also starts publishing magazines like the prestigious scientific journal Nature. All right, so the question I have is Alexander the puppet or the puppet master for the X Club, who wrote many of the articles in the early days of Nature Magazine? This is really incredible. And so who were the Macmillans? Where did they come from? And this is where the story takes a turn for the truly incredible, right? Because the Macmillans come from a crofting family. And so crofting seems to be a sort of legislated communal farming system. And so depending on how much land their parents owned, and look at how much of Scotland practices crofting, the Macmillan family could be quite wealthy. And this is where it starts to get too incredible for words, because Alexander Macmillan here, he was born in Irvine, Ayrshire. The same Irvine, Ayrshire that Alexander Payton and the immortal David Poe took refuge in when they were on the lam, hiding out with the little green men in the fields. Right? And there's more connections to be made here between the Poe story and the Macmillans that I'm just unprepared to make today. But if I ever get back to the Poe story, hopefully I can sort all that out, because this gets even better. Alexander's brother, and his parents for that matter, were born on the Isle of Arran, which you may or may not remember is part of the Scottish Islands county of Bute, right, where the name McKim is first found. No doubt about it, right? So the McKims, so involved in the promotion of the useful arts, could have social, political, or perhaps even bloodline connections to the Macmillans, who go on to start a publishing empire. And so this makes me wonder, are the Macmillans Frasers? Just like the McKims? I don't know, but the Macmillans and the Frasers certainly seem to wear similar belts, right? And both were flip-flopping supporters of Robert the Bruce. The Clan Macmillan supported Robert the Bruce during the Wars of Scottish Independence, but later supported the Lord of the Isles in opposition to the Scottish crown. But before they flip-flop, they give Robert the Bruce shelter after he kills Red Comyn. And both clans support Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn. So you tell me if these families are related. And just like the Frasers, the Clan Macmillan claimed to be an ancient Scottish clan that traces its origins back to this guy, Gilly or Gilly Creosd, right? That's close enough to Giles. And he was one of the sons of Cormac, the Bishop of Dunkeld, right? And he was a Columbian priest, which meant that he was taught the ways of our good friend St. Columba. And priests of this Columbian order shaved their head in a very specific fashion, not in the Roman fashion. And this fashion was called a Magdalene, which looked like this, right? And this is called the tonsure of St. John's. And right, so Macmillan is just the anglicized version of this, and it means son of one who bore the tonsure of St. John. So the sons of Giles became known as the Macmillans. And this was allegedly the early 12th century, or the 1100s, some more 11s in there, right? And the true Macmillan bloodline that allegedly dates back this far dies out in 1742, according to Wikipedia. And the chiefship passes on to the Macmillan family of Dunmore. But over at Scottish Field magazine, which I'm sure is published by Macmillan or Springer Nature or one of our other giant publishing concerns, right? In their article, 10 Fascinating Facts About the Clan Macmillan, their number 6 fact was that the original line becomes extinct in 1665. All right, so from 1665 to 1742, that's like a 77-year discrepancy. Who gets this wrong? But in Mud City, of course, we're going to default to the earlier date. And so that would make the first clan chieftain from Dunmore this guy, Archibald Macmillan. And so while looking through the Dunmore branch of the Macmillan tree, and seeing the preponderance of the name Alexander, there are Alexanders everywhere on this branch, I thought I would try to tie the publishing Alexander to the Macmillans of Dunmore, which I was unable to do. But doing my diligence, I was able to find some crazy things, such as the problem with Alexander the Rebel, second chief in the line, and his 2 sons, Duncan Richard Macmillan, right? He has 2 kids with the same name. One is styled Duncan Richard Macmillan III of Dunmore, and the other, Duncan Richard Macmillan of that ilk and Knapp and Dunmore, 3rd chief and 3rd baron. And this is interesting for a host of reasons. First off, they're listed out of order, and firstborn is Duncan Richard Macmillan, 3rd chief and 3rd baron. Right? He was born circa 1668, and he lives to be somewhere between 75 and 84 years old. And his mother's name was Giles McFarlane. And of course, he has a son named Alexander, whose mother was one Catherine Buchanan. Now, I find this interesting, considering the Buchanan-McKim connection through the American Society for the Promotion of Domestic Manufacturers and National Industry, as discussed in the Slave City episode. Could this James A. Buchanan, who I speculate could be the future president of the United States, be related to this Catherine Buchanan? I don't know, but seeing the way that all these families are connected, it certainly seems possible to me, if not probable, right? And so continuing on with Duncan Richard Macmillan's brother, Duncan Richard Macmillan, right, the third, he was born in 1680, and he dies somewhere between the ages of 67 and 68 years old. So he also has a nice long life. This couldn't have been confusing at all for the family, having 2 Duncan Richard Macmillans wandering around for 60 years or so, unless, of course, you actually wanted to create that confusion, perhaps being able to switch one out for the other whenever you need to. And that's just pure speculation on my part, but it is kind of interesting, just as I think it's interesting that he drowns, right? Were his handlers not paying attention to him that day when he wandered into the pool, the pond, the ocean, or wherever it was that he drowned? For some reason, my fat senses are telling me that this is a strange death for him. And it's not confusing at all that they misspell his mother's name and give her her own page, right? Of course they have the same mother, right? But 2 different spellings, 2 different genie pages, and I find this very interesting for reasons beyond my control, but not as interesting as the fact that the only begotten son, the heir apparent, this Alexander Macmillan, he was born in none other than Baltimore at St. Paul's Parish. And St. Paul's Parish is one of the oldest congregations in America. Right, so this is what the church building would have looked like when Alexander was born there, right? And this is what it looks like today. And so St. Paul's was the American head of the Church of England, and of course, it's only a block from the Basilica, right? The Basilica is here, the Rome in America, right? And the Church of England in America, just a block apart, right? And there was something on this location before the Basilica. Right? So this is the 1792 map with Howard's Woods, right? Which at one time included all of this, right? So the Basilica is going to go here, right? And so St. Paul's is right here. There is something there in 1792 for St. Paul's. And so I think it is absolutely insane that the heir apparent for the Clan Macmillan is born in St. Paul's Parish in Baltimore. Why? Was Chief Duncan here? Does this speak in any way of a relationship between the Macmillans and the McKims and the development of the useful arts? Not to mention all the Diana worshipping and satyr loving that was going on in this town. Because this story gets even better. Because not only is Alexander heir apparent to the Clan Macmillan, the chief's son. Not only is he born in Baltimore, so is his first cousin, Alexander, son of the other Duncan Richard Macmillan, born in St. Paul's Parish, 1707. And not only that, it appears that his mother died in childbirth there. Died March 5th, 1707, at 26 or 27 years old. Certainly makes it seem like she died in childbirth to me. And so this is absolutely incredible that there would be that another highly noble member of the Macmillan bloodline would be born at St. Paul's Parish in Baltimore, and this gets better still because Alexander Macmillan III of Dunmore dies in Granville, which was part of the colony of North Carolina. Granville? Are you kidding me? Granville? When this whole thing started with Sir Bevel Granville? This is just getting too unbelievable for me. Could St. Talon's Church play a bigger part in this? All right, so I'm going to wrap this one up here. Remember, guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies. Cheers.